I just finished editing this post. I attempted to fix all typos and grammar inconsistencies, as well as adding to some details for the original post. I had been so shook up when I first typed these memories out 4 days ago that when I finished, I had no desire to proofread it. I am a 32-year-old man, yet it is broad daylight as I write this post because what I am about to share haunts me to this day, to the point that merely thinking about it, or, in this case, typing this memory, is enough to send chills down my body and make me feel like a terrified child. I have only told this story to a handful of people over the past 10 years because of how terrifying an experience it was for me, but I feel like it can be therapeutic to get it off my chest and share with others. Maybe others have had similar experiences. If so, please let me know. To tell this story and give it justice, I have to tell you of an experience that happened 3 years before the terrifying encounter this post is about. Buckle up. This will be a long post, but definitely not boring. My name is Joshua, but I will change names to protect the privacy of the others involved in this story. I live in Arkansas, and in late 2003, near the middle of fall, right before it started getting really cold, my wife and I were invited to camp with a friend of mine and his girlfriend at Sugar Loaf Lake in Oklahoma. I say camp, but the actual plan was to meet at Sugar Loaf, and my friend, who we will call Bob, wanted to take me and my wife around to some paranormal places in the Sugar Loaf area. So we get there around 7 p.m. I was driving a white Ford 1996 F-150. Bob was driving a 1980 something white Celebrity. It was a really hip piece of crap vehicle. Anywho, it was late dusk, becoming dark, and we all climbed into Bob's car and he took us around the area. First, an old abandoned house. But, other than some raccoons rustling around, it was a 2-hour waste of time. Then he took us to a graveyard that was supposed to be haunted. Again, a bust. Then, an old church that was run down and supposed to be haunted. Once again, yawn. At this point, it was getting close to midnight, and my wife and I were getting pretty bored. And I spoke up to Bob, saying, "Man, this really hasn't been that freaky of a night." That's when Bob smiled, saying he was saving the best for last. He handed me a Polaroid picture of a hillside covered in trees and daylight. I asked him what it was, and he asked me if I saw a house or any type of light pole or anything in that picture, to which I replied no. He took the picture back and said that's because there isn't, and there are no power lines there either. About this time, he turned down an old dirt road and passed a small house. Then after that, it was 2 miles of dirt road with woods on one side and a barbed wire fence on the other, with about 2 acres of field connecting to a wooded hillside. Nothing to light the night except the full moon above head and the clear starry sky. After what seemed like forever, he stopped the car and told us all to get out. We did as asked. He walked us to the other side of the car, where the fence, field, and wooded hillside was. He looked at his cell phone, which his phone and mine had no signal. This was 2003, and this area had no cell towers. But he looked at his phone and said it was 11:57 and told us all to watch the middle of the hillside. Even at complete dark, I could tell this was the same field and hillside from the picture. 2 minutes go by and nothing has changed. Then exactly at midnight, a small light flickers on the middle of the hillside. A chill runs down my back as my wife, Bob, and his girlfriend and myself watch as the small light, which to me looked like an old kerosene lantern, began to move, swaying back and forth. We sat and watched in complete silence for what seemed like several minutes, when I finally spoke up and asked what the story was with this. Bob replied he did not know, but locals had told him that at midnight every night this lantern will light up and sway back and forth through the woods until the sun comes up and it disappears. Nobody knew what the story was. At the time, I was a 19-year-old guy who didn't think anything could scare me or hurt me. So since there were no houses around, I yelled out,
"We see you! Wow, you are so scary with your little lantern!"
Bob shushed me, but it was too late. My wife screamed and pointed. I was laughing. but my laughing stopped as soon as I looked to the hillside to see the lantern swaying back and forth, but moving down the hillside to the field at an unhuman pace. Gliding, it began to speed across the field towards our car. We didn't stick around to see what it was because within seconds, we were in the car flying down the dirt road back to the lake. We looked back to see the lantern moving slowly back up the hillside to where it had first appeared. The ride back was silent, until Bob spoke up saying, "Crap, I forgot to put gas in earlier and the only store around is closed. And if we decided to go back out anywhere, it'd be best to take my truck until he could get gas in the morning, as he only had about half a quarter tank." I said okay, and a few minutes later, we arrived back at Sugar Loaf Lake. We had parked by the lake docks, and we dropped my tailgate and sat and talked about what had just happened. Bob's girlfriend was pregnant at the time and told him she was hungry. He told her we brought some snacks, but she said she needed actual food. But since the local store was closed, he asked if we could take my truck to the next town over to get some food, because his car wouldn't have enough gas to get us to that town. I obliged. We shut our cooler, put the tailgate up, and loaded into my truck. I turned the key, and nothing happened. My truck was dead. Deader than dead. No ding, no lights, no clicking noise, nothing. For all intents and purposes, you would think the alternator was out. This was strange, and after the night we had, it made us all feel uneasy. We got out of the truck and popped the hood, pulled Bob's car around to the front, and attempted to jump my truck with his car. This is where it gets even weirder. As soon as we connect the jumper cables to his battery and mine, his girlfriend starts his car, and within a second, the cables in between the connectors start to smoke, and in a flash of fire, they burn up within seconds. The cables were nothing more than bits of melted rubber and ash with only the ends of clamps still on our batteries. Bob runs and turns off his car, and we take the clamps off of our batteries. We look at each other in the scary moon and starlit night. Did I mention there were no light poles around? And we both get a bad feeling at the exact same time, as we suddenly realize we have been hearing a distant noise in the lake that was getting louder. It was a boat motor. Now, like I said, this was the time of the year it was starting to get cold, especially at night. We were bundled up as it was, and we were standing still on land at night. But somebody was on a boat after midnight when it had to be chilly as all get out with the wind hitting them, and from the sound of this motor it was going pretty fast, but we saw nothing. That is, until the boat was around 50 yards away and very bright spotlight comes on, temporarily blinding us all. Bob and I tell the women to get into his car and lock the doors. I reach into the bed of my truck and give Bob a tire tool and pick up another. I work at a tire shop and had all kinds of tools of the trade in my truck. We are standing in front of the vehicles in the middle, the hoods up on both as the boat pulls up to the dock, and two heavily bearded men in their 30s to 40s step out of the boat and walk up. It's hard to give an accurate description, as their spotlight was still pointed at us, and it covered the men in an eerie shadow whilst blinding Bob and I. They look at us and at our vehicles, and one glances in the direction of the car at the women, then back at us, and lets out a small chuckle. "You fellers got some sort of car trouble?" one asks as he lights up a cigarette. Yeah, but it's nothing we can't handle," I stammer. The guy with the cigarette sniffs the air and looks down between Bob and I's feet and sees the still smoking ashes of what was the jumper cable. "Looks like it was more than your pussy jumper cables could handle. Y'all need some help? We got some tools on the boat, and I think I can fix you guys' problem right up." Then the other man who had chuckled in begins saying, "Fix 'em right up." I am speechless, and at this moment, probably with my mouth hanging open. I can't remember, as the two men walk back to their boat, and we hear what sounds like chains rattling around as we try to make out what they are doing, but the spotlight is so blinding we can barely see. But the chain noise was enough. Bob looked at me, and without saying a word, we both jumped into his car and drove the fuck out of there. For the next few hours, we drove to a populated area of houses, which wasn't many in the rural area we were pretty much stuck in, since we had very little fuel. But we all sat in the car, mostly quiet, looking around in all directions, near panic, thinking at any time that those men would find us. Bob would turn his lights on every now and then, thinking he had seen some movement in the dark. After a while, the woman fell asleep, and Bob and I talked about how fucking weird this whole ordeal had been. And he laughed, saying, "I told you it would be a scary night. I just didn't know it would be this sort of scary." At this point, the paranormal lantern wasn't even the main thing freaking me out, but the men never showed, and eventually the morning was on its way, and it was about 20 minutes until sunrise, and Bob asked if I wanted to go see if the lantern really disappears at sunrise. I asked if he was sure he had enough gas, and he said yeah, the local store opens up in about an hour, so we'll be fine. I tell him in that case, then yeah. We wake the women up and drive back to that hillside. We get there with about 4 minutes left until sunrise. We still see the lantern swaying in the woods. Bob looks at me, and I smile and do the motion for zipping my lips, and we all watch and wonder as right at sunrise, the lantern slowly fades away to nothing. After this, we get back in the car and drive back to the lake, feeling safer now. When we get there, there is no sign of the boat, and the hood of my truck is still up, and the doors are still locked. On a whim, I tell Bob I'm going to try to start the truck one more time before he drives us somewhere where I can get a cell signal and call for help. And I'll be damned, the truck started right up and with no hesitation or problem. We all went our separate ways, happy to have seen the sunrise and counting our blessings and swearing to leave the paranormal investigating in this area to others, and swearing that we never wanted to come back to this area and run into the boat people again. However, all things fade with time, even fear and common sense. 3 years later, Bob, who I haven't seen in almost 2 years at that point, calls me up and says he has a proposition for me. He goes on to tell me he has a group of himself and 3 other Wiccans who go out and do a seance in haunted places, and asked me if I would be willing to film their sessions in the haunted places for their records and that they would pay me well for my services. I am no Wiccan, but I have always loved the paranormal. Even after what I went through at Sugar Loaf, I still had an itch to scratch when it came to getting scared and dealing with the paranormal and the unknown. And I told him yes, I would love to film for them, but I had no interest in joining in, that I was okay with watching and just getting out to be there looking into the paranormal again. So of course, my next question was, when and where are we going to be doing this at first? When he answered me, I got a terrible gut feeling, and I wished so much that I had trusted my gut and told him I had changed my mind. Remember that lantern light out near Sugar Loaf? He asked me as if there was any way I could ever forget. Yeah, I stammered. Why do you ask? I told my group the story, and they want to do the ritual there and see if we can contact the spirit and find out why it is there and what it wants. Bob replied, I don't know, man. I said, oh, come on, Josh. Trust me, you will be safe, and I'm going to pay you $250 just to sit there and film it. He retorted. At the time, I was about to become a father, and money was tight, because diapers, formula, and the like cost a small fortune. Not to mention it was my first kid, and my new wife's first kid, so she had been going crazy spending money on not just the necessities, but also buying only top-of-the-line baby products like toys, crib, playpen, baby monitors, stroller, car seat, a combination pack and play-changing table, diaper genie, and designer baby clothes. So, because my wife was putting us in the poorhouse, I had to weigh out my fear of the area he wanted to go back to with how important it was I make all the extra money I could. So, against my better judgment, I accepted the offer, and a week later, I was in the same beat-down celebrity Bob was driving 3 years before. This time with Bob and 2 guys and 1 girl that were complete strangers to me. They each were dressed very gothic and had these pentagram necklaces or something of the sort. It was 11:50 when we got there, and the 4 of them sat in a tight circle, and I was behind them to the right, about 5 feet from the barbed fence that was in front of the field that led to the hillside, and my back was to the hillside and bushes at the fence line, and I was filming my friend's circle as they all started chanting something. As I had been typing this entire post, I had been getting knots in my stomach knowing that I was coming to this part of the story. This part of the story haunts my dreams and even waking hours to this day. I am going to do my best to describe how the following events unfolded, though I know mere words cannot do justice to the pure terror that ensued or how horribly horrific the events sounded and were. So, when reading or listening to this, turn your imagination all the way up. And believe me when I say, up to this point in my life, I was interested in the paranormal. It was a fun hobby to go out ghost hunting or getting myself spooked or whatever. But after this night, I never look at paranormal as fun or interesting anymore. I show it respect and stay as far away as possible. As much as I dread it, I will now finish telling the story. As his group is chanting, Bob lights up this candle in the middle of them and opens up some sort of book. It's not like a scary antique spellbook or anything. It looks like a newer hardcover. Anyways, he starts reciting words from it, and then he looks at his phone and tells his group to be quiet and look at the hill. I turn the camera, and at midnight on the dot, the lantern appears. One member of Bob's group blurts out, "Cool!" I roll my eyes, since the way these people were dressed and the way they carried themselves, the word cool didn't seem to fit in their vocabulary. Then Bob says to the group to join hands as they attempt to communicate with the spirit. I turn my back to the light and begin to film the group as they began again chanting, and Bob reads from the book. Then they start asking questions in hopes the spirit will respond. About this time, a wind picks up and Bob's candle goes out. He tells everyone to hold on and tells me, "Cut the camera for a minute." And I oblige and stop recording and watch as Bob tries his lighter, then 2 lighters from his group, but none of the lighters are working. I'm sitting down watching the group when I started hearing a rustling behind me. I jump up, leaving camera on ground and spinning around. Bob and his group are preoccupied with their candle and lighter problem, and as I spin around, I am blinded by the brightest light I have ever seen. What I believe was the lantern up close and personal, but as quick as it appears, the lantern is gone. And the lantern is nowhere to be seen. If it had been the lantern that blinded me, it had moved from the hillside across the field and right behind me, with me not even realizing it, within the span of maybe 30 seconds. I look around for the lantern on the hillside and nothing. It's only 12:15 or so, and the light has always stayed until sunrise. At this moment, the wind quits blowing, and I hear Bob's lighter finally flick, and I see it light up, and I mutter, Guys, did you see that?" They all turn and ask what I am talking about. But before I can answer them, we are all stopped dead in our tracks by a distant laughter coming from seemingly nowhere and everywhere around us. But distant at the moment, like far off, and this is no ordinary laughter. This laughter sounds like the laughter of hundreds, maybe even thousands of children. That haunts me to this very day. As I type this, I am looking around the room I am in. Whenever I think or talk about this experience, I can vividly remember that terrifying sound and hear it in my head. Also, it just occurred to me, if you put the letter S at the beginning of laughter, it spells slaughter. Why did I just think that? The best way I can describe this laughter is for you to imagine listening to a large group of kids singing "Row, row, row your boat." You know how one kid will start and seconds later another will join in, starting at the beginning of the song, and so on and so forth. Well, this sounded like that, but with hundreds or thousands of children laughing, as if one would start laughing and seconds later another would, and that pattern went on, an endless loop. I am not saying the laughter sounded like the song "Row, row, row your boat." I am saying the laughter in unison sounded just like kids who do the singing of "Row, row, row your boat." One would start, then seconds later another, and then another, and then another, and then another. And the laughter was getting louder, closer. There was a sinister laughing, goofy laughing, giggling all around us, coming from all directions. I was shaking. I could not move. I was spinning around and around, looking off in the distance. This couldn't be real. This sort of thing does not happen. What the fuck was happening? I scream at Bob and his group that they need to get the fuck out of there. But they are all already running for the car, leaving their Wiccan book and candle behind. And without hesitation, I run after them and jump in the car just as the laughter is becoming deafening. We haul ass out of there and drive about a mile up the road and pull over as Bob is in no condition to drive, as we are all freaking out. We all get out of the car, pacing around the car, asking each other if we really just heard what we just heard. I tell Bob that I am sorry, but I left his camera behind. He says he does not care, that he isn't going back for it. At this point, I got on my hands and knees panting, trying to catch my breath, as I have never in my life been so terrified. That is when all of our chatter stops, as we once again hear the laughter off in the distance, very quietly at first, but slowly getting closer and closer and louder until once again it is becoming deafening. We jump back in the car and speed away. We drive about 6 miles, and for the first 3 miles we can all still hear the laughter in the distance with our windows down a little. We all begin to calm a little by mile 4 when the laughter can no longer be heard. But we have no intention of pulling over again, and Bob's friend is in the passenger seat with his phone, waiting for a signal to pop up. And at about mile 6, Bob's friend says, "Hey, I got full bars." And he hands the phone to Bob as he calls a friend of his who is well versed in the occult and educated in it as we are driving, and he is describing what happened to the lady. Bob later told me his friend told him she believed it was the children of Hecate, or something like that. I have no idea about what Hecate is, but it sounded more like a guess to me. Anyways, as Bob is on the phone speeding out of the area, me and the 2 other people in the back seat all get a chill at the same time, and they told me later that just like me, the hair on the back of their neck stood up as loud snapping noises came from the end of the car, and Bob's celebrity stops dead in its tracks and will no longer move. He tries everything, but the car is not moving. We later discovered that a tie rod had snapped. Anyways, that friend Bob was talking to on the phone only lived about 20 minutes away from where we were, and they said they were on their way. As we sat in the car, nobody spoke, and after about 3 minutes, we saw a pair of headlights coming down the road towards us. We knew it was too soon to be Bob's friend, but me and Bob thought maybe we could get a ride from a local, and we all unloaded out of the car and stood in front of it on the vehicle to hopefully stop. Now, I cannot be certain, but my gut tells me I am correct. But the vehicle doesn't stop, but as it comes into view, it is a beat-up old pickup truck, and it slows down, and in the truck are 2 men in their 30s to 40s with huge beards. They stare at us and speed up after passing by. I look at Bob, and before I can speak, he says what I was already thinking. "The guy's from the boat!" Before I can say anything back, we see headlights coming from the direction that the truck had just went by, and we went still and quiet as the same guys in the same truck passed by slowly again, staring at us on the side of the road. Bob called his friend back and told her to drive there like hell and get here now, and hung up. 4 or 5 minutes go by and we see headlights coming. Relieved, we all get our stuff ready thinking it is Bob's friend. Then his phone rings. It was the lady who was coming to get us, telling Bob she took a wrong turn and is going to be about 10 to 15 more minutes before she gets there. Bob hangs up the phone and watches in terror, as do I, as the same truck slowly passes by again. This time with only one of the men in the truck. This time, though, the driver slows to a crawl and says, "Looks like you fellas could use some help," and then speeds up and drives off. This cemented the fact to Bob and I that we were definitely dealing with the boat guys. But where the hell did the other guy go? Why wasn't he in the passenger seat? And, to make matters worse at this point, something we had almost completely forgot about due to the boatmen was immediately reminded to us as we begin to hear the laughter again off in the distance, but all around us like before, and over the next few minutes, it started getting closer and closer. I am almost pissing my pants as the sound is getting deafening and we have nowhere to run this time. And then, from behind our car off in the distance, we see 2 sets of headlights come on and 2 vehicles coming towards us, slowly side by side, taking up the entire width of the backcountry dirt road, both coming our way. The laughter now seems to be coming from the woods on both sides of the road we are stuck on, and the laughing seems to be zeroing in on us as if hundreds of thousands of children are within reaching distance of us. There is no wind, no sound other than the crunch of tires on the rocky dirt road of the 2 vehicles slowly driving towards us. With our last shred of hope fading away into the laughter of the children and the headlights of the 2 vehicles surely being driven by the boatmen, we are given a reprieve, as at this time coming from the other direction, we see other sets of headlights coming fast. We hold our breath, the laughter, the boatmen. What could be next? How will we get out of this? And that is when the vehicle that was coming fast pulls up, and it is Bob's friend. She unlocks the doors on her car and rolls her windows down and begins to tell us to get in. When this happens, the 2 sets of headlights coming from the other direction turn off, and Bob's friend says, "Oh my God, you weren't kidding about the laughing kids." She screams at us to get in, and we do. We begin to tell her about the boat guys, and she turns the car around, and no sooner than she starts to drive away, the 2 sets of headlights come on again, this time with their brights on, and they are about a car length behind the car we are all crammed in. I yell to the driver, "Go, go, go!" channeling my inner Jeff Goldblum, telling her faster, must go faster. She floors it in for about a mile. The 2 vehicles stay on our ass, and they turn off onto a side road. For about the next 2 miles after that, we can all hear the laughter still way off in the distance with our windows down. Then, after 3 miles, the laughter was gone. To this day, I have no explanation of what happened. What the laughing children were, why the laughing followed us, if the boatmen were connected to all of this somehow, or if they were merely a coincidence that happened to terrify us at the same time as the paranormal stuff was happening. And, if that is the case, why did they not react to the laughing children's sound? Is the lantern connected to the laughing children? Or did Bob and his group mistakenly call forth the laughing children through their ritual? Like I said, this happened years ago, but I still feel just as terrified now when I tell people about it or think about it. I have had constant chills and goosebumps as I have written this. I am sorry for typos or grammar issues, but I am a bit shaky as well. I am going to post the story as is. I hope it is readable, and I hope somebody who reads this and has had a similar experience can share their story with me. In a weird way, I believe that would help me deal with the trauma this experience still causes me to this day. To all of you who think the paranormal is just a fun hobby to get your thrills with, I beg of you, and I warn you, that we are not prepared for what is really out there. You can think nothing will scare you or harm you, but you are dealing with unknown things. You have no idea how powerful or mundane the paranormal could be. If you use the paranormal as a thrill-seeking hobby, just use caution. And as always, have your vehicle checked out beforehand. Oh, and watch out for seemingly sociopathic hillbillies and laughing children. Hope everybody who reads this sleeps well. But I know that after telling my story like this, that for at least the next few nights, I will be getting no sleep at all. Hey everybody, Sue Siren here. I hope you enjoyed that story. I've actually been meaning to do that for a while, as it was actually sent to me by LaRueX. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. During one of my very first videos quite a while ago, actually, and I've been meaning to do it, and I keep telling you I'm going to do it, but I was kind of afraid to since it had been done so many times. But like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed my narration, and I hope you as well enjoyed my narration of it, vipdad or LaRueX, whatever you want to be called, as we've spoken on both Reddit and as well YouTube. And just to give you a little bit of information, my viewers, as well as him, I myself am a Wiccan, and it's actually called a pentacle, not a pentagram. I know that you probably don't really care, but I do, so whatever. I'm actually setting up for Yule right now. Don't get me wrong, I celebrate Christmas too, because I think that that's just a commercial holiday and it's fun for basically everybody if you want to, just be with the people that you love. Either way, there's definitely some really awesome channels you should be checking out that has some really great holiday themed horror going on right now. I definitely want to shout out to Black Eyed Blonde and Duchess Dark for their really great holiday specials they have going on right now. I myself listen to them both in the morning on my commutes to work, and it's really awesome. So if you haven't checked them out, definitely check them out. I also want to do a shout out to Swamp Dweller for being such an amazing support and friend while being on here. He's been there basically since I started, and he's still there with me, collabing with me all of the time. So I definitely just wanted to say thank you to him since he's been such a huge support and such a great friend. Holiday seasons have been crazy, but I still do plan on posting 2 videos every week, one during the week and one on the weekend. I know it's been kind of crazy as to which day it's been, but it's going to get way more consistent after the holidays. I'm sure a lot of you aren't even listening to this right now, and that's totally fine. But, as always, just remember,
you shouldn't believe everything you hear, or should you?